Diversity quotas are stupid. People want the best engineer building the bridge they're going to use every day to take their kids to school. Quotas promote discrimination against those that don't meet the diversity targets. These are some common arguments for sticking with meritocracy and abandoning company targets to increase the number of women in the workforce. Whether or not you agree with the above statements, stick around because on today's episode of Building Her Way, we're going to dig deeper into where these negative opinions of quotas come from and unpack the benefits and shortcomings of implementing diversity targets. Hey there, fellow STEM femmes. Welcome to Building Her Way, a podcast created to empower underrepresented groups working in male-dominated industries to break down barriers and challenge the status quo as we work towards creating a more inclusive and equitable future. My name is Monique Elizabeth, a senior environmental advisor in the construction industry with a Bachelor of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and I can't wait to share some of my thoughts and experiences on today's topic. I also encourage everyone to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. Part 1. We're looking at quotas all wrong. As a young girl and now a woman in STEM, I was and still am constantly force-fed generic motivational presentations and workshops aimed at attracting me to and retaining me in the construction industry. I've also been made very aware that there are quotas or targets for companies to meet for the number of women they've employed. I say all of this with a bit of spite because that's how I felt. I found it insulting that I was being treated like I needed extra help and I didn't want my male colleagues to assume I was employed because I was a quota. I had decided on my own accord that I wanted to pursue engineering. I was confident in my decision and was able to be resilient to the discrimination and assumptions made about me. So why couldn't everyone else be? Well, what I failed to acknowledge or understand was that I was privileged to have had this experience. Not just because I was white, able-bodied, English-speaking with supportive parents, but also because I didn't care about the fact that my journey as a woman in STEM may be more difficult than my male counterparts. The moment I acknowledged all of this was the moment I realized that these presentations, workshops, and quotas weren't for me. They are for the people who don't have this support or need additional support. They're for the gals and non-binary pals in primary school and high school who are hesitant to pursue STEM because they don't feel represented, see no role models in the industry, and aren't willing to put themselves through years of potential discrimination and scrutiny for a career that they might like. My experiences and evolving understanding of company initiatives have made me want to dig deeper into the conflicting opinions surrounding quotas and the potential impacts that they have on the industry. LGBTQIA+ individuals and people of color are also marginalized in these industries, and these quotas currently targeted to women should really extend to all underrepresented groups. I wanted to mention this before I continue, as I will be referring to women specifically in this episode, as it is based heavily on my own experiences and existing quotas which do heavily focus on attracting women to the workforce. Part 2. Quotas versus targets. Before we start our deep dive, I wanted to point out that there are some distinct differences between targets and quotas. As defined by the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, targets are specific measurable objectives generally set by an organization at their own discretion with discrete timeframes in which they are to be achieved. Consequences for not meeting a target may be set and enforced as the organization sees fit. While voluntary, targets may also be strongly encouraged by external factors, such as the Australian Securities Exchange, Corporate Governance Council, or from recommendations on Diversity and Workplace Gender Equality Act 2012. Gender diversity targets can be implemented at any level within an organization, whereas quotas are mandatory. Like targets, quotas are also specific, time-bound, measurable objectives, but are usually set externally by a body with authority to impose them on an organization. For example, the Parliament. Establishing quotas usually includes setting penalties for failing to meet them. These are enforced by a body external to an individual company and are non-negotiable by individual organizations. In this episode, I'm going to use the two terms interchangeably as I am broadly speaking about both, and distinguishing between them doesn't greatly impact the purpose of this specific discussion. However, there is a lot of discussion around which is more effective and perhaps something worthy of its own episode in the future. Part 3. Deep dive into quotas versus meritocracy. company. Now that's all been cleared up, let's touch on some of the reasons why people aren't always the biggest advocates for quotas. I believe a lot of the concerns I'm about to mention come from a very valid place, but I also think it's important to challenge and explore initial reactions and assumptions. When you dig deeper and look at the issues with a wider lens, you realize that these concerns can be addressed, refuted, or even validated short term to implement a long-term plan. As we all know, the majority of STEM industries, construction included, are male-dominated, with women being vastly underrepresented in the workforce. This lack of diversity can be attributed to various factors, including societal biases and stereotypes, lack of exposure to the industry, and a lack of support and opportunities for women in construction. The goal of quotas and targets is to make the recruitment, retainment, and promotion of women more equitable to help combat these challenges, addressing the unfairness of quotas, gender bias, and role models. From my experience, the most common reason against quotas is the perception of unfairness. Some people, my younger self included, believe that diversity targets are unfair because they prioritize diversity over merit. They argue that quotas may result in less qualified individuals being hired or promoted solely based on their gender or race, instead of their abilities and qualifications. A story that sticks with me from one of the women in construction conferences I went to was one where a senior role needed filling, and the manager of the team went to one of the male team members, discussed the role with him, and offered him the position. The woman telling this story at the conference was part of his team and was suitable for the role but was never approached. So she took it upon herself to ask the manager about the position and why he hadn't discussed it with her. In response, the manager apologized in shock as he realized there was no good reason and acknowledged that he had just exhibited unconscious gender bias. That story, among many others, demonstrate that not all discrimination or bias is intentional or malicious. When we're so used to something, for example, men dominating the construction industry and leadership roles, it takes just that little bit more effort to accept something different. If unconscious bias wasn't a thing, then the need for quotas may be deemed less warranted. But setting these targets give the industry that push to combat gender bias. They give women a higher chance of getting a seat in that interview room and the opportunity to advocate for themselves face to face, where previously they may have been prematurely disregarded due to bias. This means in some cases, without quotas, we aren't actually getting the most suitable person for the job because unconscious bias is interfering with the process. I have spoken to many hiring managers throughout my career, and it is extremely unlikely someone will be hired purely due to a quota. They will always assess their suitability to the job based on their skill, experience, and fit to the company first. Furthermore, suitability to a role is not simply a matter of how talented an individual is in abstract, but rather it is a measure of the contribution that they can make to an institution. To elaborate, a candidate may not have 10 years of experience as a civil engineer, but they are amazing at conflict resolution and are likely to improve the retainment of other women in their team. Now, I know that if there are two identical people, but one is male and one is female, diversity targets may influence the employer to hire the female candidate, which may seem unfair. But this brings me on to my next point. Unconscious bias doesn't just impact those hiring for roles. It also influences the sort of position someone is willing to apply for. By requiring companies to hire a certain number of women, quotas can help to increase the visibility of diversity in the industry, providing young women with role models and mentors who can support and encourage their career aspirations. This is essential to demolish that unconscious bias of what an engineer looks like for young women who are considering a career in STEM. When young girls can see women working in male-dominated industries and succeeding in their careers, they are more likely to consider pursuing similar paths. Now, obviously, you can have role models with differing gender or culture to your own, but particularly as a young kid, choosing what university degree to study or a graduate deciding what jobs to apply for, seeing someone in an industry that looks and speaks like you is powerful. So, although it may seem unfair that a woman is hired over the equally skilled and experienced man because of a diversity target, I believe it is just as, if not more unfair, that young girls don't have many women to aspire to within STEM, and therefore some don't even consider pursuing a career in the industry. Empowering a more diverse group of people to apply for these male-dominated roles will give employers a wider selection pool with a wider variety of skills and experiences, which will actually further improve the quality of people working for the company. If you're enjoying following the podcast, it would mean the world if you like the video if you're on YouTube, or rate the show if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. The confronting truth of reverse discrimination. A fear of reverse discrimination is another argument against quotas or targets. This essentially means some people worry that diversity quotas will result in reverse discrimination against men. They believe that diversity quotas may exclude qualified men from job opportunities or promotions in favor of less qualified individuals from diverse backgrounds. In this case, women. There is a lot of overlap between this and the perception of unfairness, but there were a few specific points that I wanted to touch on. First of all, the term reverse discrimination can be misleading as it implies equivalent moral wrongness to your typical forms of discrimination. This overlooks the fact that the moral wrongness of discrimination lies not just in the harm to an individual, but also in its contribution to the systemic disadvantage of a specific group as a whole within society. For this reason and the magnitude of historical impacts, reverse discrimination is not ethically equivalent to discrimination, and in some cases, it may actually be justified to redress the systemic disadvantage women and minority groups face. This may sound a bit out there for some, but asking typically privileged groups to temporarily take on disadvantages, to break down injustices and allow others to catch up and start building a more equitable culture for the future seems reasonable to me. Now, I don't want to ignore the fact that there may be managers or colleagues that take things too far, resulting in discrimination, but I don't think that's reason enough to completely abandon or disregard implementing quotas as a method to level the playing field. Now, obviously, it's a complex and controversial topic that isn't easy to implement effectively, but I think it's something worth genuine consideration, even if you can't see the benefit at first. It's also important to acknowledge that we live in a capitalist society that rewards putting yourself first and working towards a career that earns you more money, rather than one where everyone is happy and treated equally. This makes it more challenging to convince people that it is a social responsibility to rectify past wrongs and ensure equal opportunities for all, and furthermore, to gain support for that. The strength of transferable skills. When hiring based on meritocracy, applicants that have been to university and received a degree can have a disproportionate advantage over others. Well, obviously, you may think, but we need to acknowledge that people can develop transferable skills from other professions that may not require a degree, or maybe their passion and ability to learn means that they will become invaluable to the team in the future. As the industry continues to promote a career in construction to a more diverse field of candidates, a lot of people are already going to be in a professional trade. If we want to attract more women to the construction industry, we need to challenge the idea that a degree or a certain number of years of experience dictate how suited someone is to a role in order to actually capitalize on all this time and money that is being placed in attracting them. I was listening to the Leaky Pipeline, which is a NAWIC podcast, National Association of Women in Construction, and they were talking to Jo Farrell, who just won the ACT Australian of the Year award. She's also the general manager for a construction company and a charity owner. She talks about how neither her or her current operations manager have a degree. Jo had come up through the industry as a chippy after getting a mystery mark for her HSC, and she explains that her operations manager came through a yacht building traineeship, but is one of the best people she knows in project, financial, and commercial management. So, what do quotas have to do with all of this? Well, they can help motivate hiring managers to accept this challenge and hire someone based off qualities beyond meritocracy. The infamous pay gap. Now, I couldn't discuss quotas without quickly talking about how they can also help to address the pay gap between men and women in the construction industry. Traditionally, women in construction have been underrepresented in higher paying positions, such as management or technical roles. But women in construction still often earn less than their male counterparts, even when they have the same level of experience and qualifications. Quotas can help to increase the number of women in higher paying roles, reducing the pay gap and providing young women with more equitable opportunities for financial stability and growth. By setting quotas for the number of women that companies must hire or promote, it can help to balance out the gender representation in the industry, creating a more diverse and equitable workforce. With more women in leadership positions, there is a greater chance that they will have a say in setting salaries and negotiating pay rises, which can further help to close the pay gap. In addition, quotas can also provide opportunities for women to gain experience and skills that are valuable in higher paying roles. By providing training and mentoring programs, companies can help to support women in their career development, ensuring that they have the necessary skills and qualifications to advance to higher paying positions. This can also help to create a pipeline of talented and experienced women who are ready to take on leadership roles in the future. It is important to note, however, that quotas alone may not be enough to eliminate the gender pay gap. It is also necessary to address systemic biases and discrimination that may exist in the industry, as well to provide equal access to education and training opportunities for women. Nonetheless, quotas can be an effective tool to reducing the gender pay gap by increasing the representation of women in higher paying roles and creating a more diverse and equitable workforce. Part 4. Are quotas effective? There is a lot of skepticism about whether diversity quotas will be effective in increasing diversity and promoting inclusion within male-dominated industries. I've mentioned this before, but people argue that quotas may create a superficial appearance of diversity without addressing deeper structural issues such as bias and discrimination. A lot of the quotas that are currently in place are quite new to the industry, so it will take some time to fully understand how effective they are. But I do agree with this argument. I'm confident in saying that quotas alone will not effectively improve the diversity within workplaces. They need to be implemented with other policies, accommodations, and cultural change. Concerns have been raised that quotas are unfair or discriminatory, and as I said before, I thought this myself. But the reality is that they are necessary to break down the barriers for women who may not have had the same opportunities or access to the industry as men. These barriers may include a lack of role models, limited exposure to the industry, and gender biases in hiring and promotion. Quotas can also help companies to tap into a wider pool of talent, which can lead to greater success and profitability. In addition, quotas can also help to provide young women with a clearer pathway to entry into the construction industry. Many young women may not know where to start or what steps to take to pursue a career in construction. Quotas can provide a framework for companies to actively seek out and recruit female talent, making it easier for young women to navigate the industry and find job opportunities. Remember, it's not always about what quotas do for me. It's about what they can do for the younger generations and the future of the industry.